Wednesday, November 6, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So I think I can safely say that Trump has won. Even the New York Times, the toilet paper of record, as Gerald Celente calls it, is saying that Trump has a 95% chance of winning. So how do I feel about that? Yesterday I said that I'm neutral. I'm not an American. I'm in the UK. I was originally born in Brazil. So I'm kind of neutral and I'm just an observer. But I know a lot about American history. I went to the American high school in Brazil, in Rio. I went to university in Florida. And it's one of the reasons why I moved to the UK back in 1992 from Switzerland, because I knew that England was a lot more similar culturally and socially to the United States than any other country in Europe is, for that matter. And I don't regret moving to England. So I'm aware of the American system of government. And of course, the original intent of the founding fathers has been completely trampled upon. And this is what I want to talk about today, because I think it's the most important topic for America. And if America wants to really be free again, and if people want to have individual freedom and small government, because we don't have small government in the US. We don't have it here in the UK. And that's the question of the central bank. So it would be great to see the subject of ending the Fed come more to the fore. I'm not expecting a Trump administration to come in and start with ending the Fed. They're probably not going to do it. So how do I feel about the Trump win instead of a Kamala Harris win? Well, it's very difficult to say who controls the deep state. If there's two factions, and I think there are two factions of the deep state, maybe the Trump faction is a little bit more friendly towards the general public. I think that's what it is. But let's focus then on ending the Fed and why it's so important. Well, I'm going to refer to another president, Andrew Jackson, and I highly recommend this biography of Andrew Jackson by H.W. Brands. A very good book. So Andrew Jackson, he didn't renew the charter for the Second Bank of the United States. And so it closed doors in 1836. And for 78 years, America didn't have a central bank. And America flourished in those 74 years. It became the biggest economy in the world by 1914, the year that the Fed was created or started actually functioning. It was created by an act of Congress that was voted upon when very few people were there on December 23rd, 1913. And that was a big moment, I think. And it's one of the reasons why we are where we are now, because the central bankers took over the country. And I think until the Fed is abolished and the United States goes back to sound money, and the Constitution says that it's upon Congress's responsibility to regulate the value of the money, and by that they don't mean regulating interest rates. They mean regulating the weight and measures of gold and silver coins. That's all it is. And with a central bank, though, as a central bank is, well, it's the government, right? It's a marriage between the bankers and government, which is a coup d'etat, the bankers and the government, they scratch each other's back. And that's why we are where we are right now with $36 trillion in national debt. And that's why there's so much wealth inequality. That's why the American economy has become so financialized. And I have to recommend another book, which I'm halfway through reading, which is Good as Gold by Judy Shelton. And she talks about all this that I've just told you about how money really is a weight, and it has to be always the same. It's crazy if you thought, let's say, for example, that you could change the length of a mile or how much a pound or a kilo is every second, just like the foreign exchange markets do. So I'm not sure, and I have to finish reading the book, but what Judy Shelton is proposing is backing U.S. Treasuries by gold. But in my view, ideally, it would be good to have almost no debt. After all, Andrew Jackson wasn't the only president that slayed the central bankers institution, Second Bank of the United States. He also went on to pay off the national debt. So why does a country need a national debt? It doesn't. It's just something that has been foisted upon us, has been brainwashed into us by the central banks and governments, who are, of course, run by the bankers. And the more a country is in debt, the more the bankers benefit, because they're the ones who lend this debt out of thin air as well. And they reap the benefit of your labor and your efforts. And they do that through inflation, through taxation. And I just wanted to show you, because most people think government has to do something for the public. But I think the founders and their objective was to make government very, very tiny, so that government would be a servant of the people and protect people's rights and administer the rule of law, protect rights, property, and So I wanted to show you here, we've got data here from, it goes back to 1850, and this is government spending as a percentage of GDP. And as you can see here for the United States, the latest number they have is 2020, and it was 46%, almost 50% of GDP is government spending. And I think they probably add federal and state spending, all kinds of government spending. But if we go back to 1910, as you can see, it was 2.19%. And why do I go back to 1910? Well, because in 1914, you had World War I, and then you had the central bank was created. And then it started growing, as you can see, 7.3% in 2020. It came off in 1930, back down to 3.64, which was normal because, the United States went into the war late. But yes, and then you had the Great Depression, and that was an excuse to lift that number again, and it's been going up ever since. So what I'm trying to say here, without the central bank printing money out of thin air, and they did that actually in the 1930s as well, the Federal Reserve was actively buying government bonds, even though legally it wasn't allowed to do that. They got away with that. And then I think in 1934 or 35, they put that in the books that they could buy government bonds. Prior to that, the Fed could only really hold gold on its balance sheet and short-term paper to try to keep liquidity in the economy. So that's why, without ending the Fed and going back to sound constitutional money. America will never go back to being how it was prior to the Federal Reserve. Yeah, that's my hope then, that more and more people will start talking about ending the Fed. So, yes, I think we've got 76 days from today until the inauguration on January 20th. And I think it will be a chaotic interregnum. And I made a video about that the other day. Especially with the people that are in charge now. We don't really know who's in charge. It's not really Biden or Harris. What they'll come up with to make life really hard for the upcoming administration. So, yeah, batten down the hatches. Do whatever you need to do to keep yourself and your family safe, and protect your financial health as well with gold and silver. I still think that's the place to be. And we're going to look at the markets now, because the reaction of the markets has been quite amazing here overnight. We've seen massive moves in stocks and bonds and precious metals and the currencies as well. For example, as I speak here, it's 8:45 a.m. London time. We got the Dow futures up 1,000 points. Yes, 1,000 points, 2.5%. We've got the S&P up 123 points, or 2.13%, and the Nasdaq up 1.8%, or 360 points. So it definitely looks like the market is very happy with a Trump victory, and I think that makes sense. I think Kamala victory would have been a victory for the woke socialist WEF, World Economic Forum crowd, who want to destroy our economies and take us back to like the Middle Ages. They're pushing this climate agenda narrative, which is a bankster agenda. So I think that's why the stock market is doing really well. But I think it's going to get very volatile. What about gold? Well, gold, I looked earlier. I got up in the middle of the night. It was only down about $3 or $4. But then it traded down to like almost 2,700 a couple of hours ago, and it's now at 27.29, so it's down about $14. Silver has really had a wild ride. We got down to 31.40. That was when gold got down to 27.01, but now we're almost a dollar higher at 32.30. So a lot of volatility. The other interesting moves we've seen in the markets, we'll look now at the treasuries, treasury yields. Well, I said yesterday that the big winner from the election will be the bond vigilantes. And I don't think I'm wrong, because right now the 10-year yield is at 441. It's up 13 basis points. And the high was 447. So we almost got to 4.5% already. Here in the UK, UK gilt yields are continuing to rise as well. The 10 years at 455. But it was really interesting to see as well the currencies. And by that I mean the pound, the euro, and the yen. So the dollar rallied strongly against the pound, for example. The pound dropped about 1.5% down to like 128.45. Right now it's at 129. It's still down 1%. The euro is down 1.5% at 107.65. And the dollar is up 1.6% versus the yen. I think what this shows is that a Trump administration will be tough on its international partners and even, allies, if you want to call it that. There's fear, of course, of tariffs. even though I think a lot of it is just a negotiating stance for upcoming Trump administration. And one of the things that Judy Shelton talks about, and she's completely right, is that in a world where there's no sound money, where countries change their exchange rates whenever they want, it's really hard to have fair and free trade. And I agree with her. So one of the ways to go back to free trade, fair trade, and create wealth is to have sound money everywhere. But it's really hard because, unfortunately, governments tend to cheat. And what do I mean by that? Well, and we come back to central banking and why it's really important that we talk about abolishing central banks and making sure governments don't have the help of central banks. And the excuse for people who push central banks is that they're the lender of last resort. But I'm sorry, bankers don't, they need to be responsible. Having a lender of last resort to bail them out anytime there's trouble actually creates moral hazard. So I think that's a really bad philosophy, the lender of last resort. We need to do away with it. So there you go. So how is this Trump win going to affect the UK? Well, I think the European leaders, especially Starmer here in the UK and others, they're going to be under a lot of pressure from a Trump administration. They're kind of diametrically opposed philosophically. Here in the UK, we've got a World Economic Forum stooge in charge, and hopefully in the US that isn't the case anymore. And why do I say hopefully? Well, because Donald Trump has been to Davos, he has met Klaus Schwab, so I'm not really sure. But maybe things will improve. So there you go. With that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.